The Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in his glory, in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
Historian Douglas Brinkley writes, "Usually one day in a century rises above the others as an accepted turning point or historic milestone. It becomes the climactic day or the day of that century." 9/11 was a huge turning point in this century. And I suspect that there are more to come in this century. It's really only the beginning. Turning points bring major change, and they cause us to move in a different direction. Turning points can cause global change, change within an entire culture, or if the turning point is in our own life, it can cause us as individuals to change the direction we are going. I know that I have experienced turning points in my life, and it is because of those turning points that I am here today. Well, today we come to that place in the gospel where we find the central turning point in Mark. Just before reading this, Jesus has asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And in response, impetuous, ADHD Peter had gotten all excited and professed that Jesus is indeed the long-promised Messiah. And now Jesus immediately begins to tell his disciples what being the Messiah is all about, what he will be doing. He says, "It is necessary that the Son of Man proceed to an ordeal of suffering, be tried and found guilty by the elders, high priests, and religion scholars, be killed, and after 3 days rise up alive." Needless to say, Jesus' words to the disciples are devastating. His words shatter and obliterate the disciples' preconceived notions of everything they expected a coming Messiah would do. So as reactive Peter hears this, he immediately backs away and rebukes Jesus. Jesus' words simply destroy the glamour of following this long-expected Messiah. This is certainly not the kind of life Peter wants to undertake. While Jesus seems to be the Messiah, the Jewish people had never expected a leader who must suffer and die. That was simply ludicrous and irrational. Who in their right mind even chooses to proceed to an ordeal of suffering, as Jesus says he is doing? And who in their right mind wants to even follow a leader who is on his way to die? This comes as a complete surprise. Nothing they have experienced has prepared them for Jesus to say that he will suffer and die on a cross. And what is even more appalling is that Jesus is telling them if they want to be his disciples, they must deny themselves and take up their crosses and follow him. No, this is not what they had hoped for. Now, lest we judge Peter too quickly, we need to take a serious look at ourselves. Jesus' words are just as hard for us to hear. You see, most of us choose religion and come to believe important things deeply because we feel they are good for us. We like a religion that makes us feel good. We like a faith that fits our comfortable, recreational lifestyles. We like a faith that makes us feel happy, loved, at peace, and free from the challenges of life around us. We want a religion that will make us healthy, wealthy, and wise. We want to follow a strong God who heals our illnesses, provides ample prosperity, guarantees security, and urges our sport teams on to victory. Suffering does not fit into that plan. It's not appealing. If any of us are offered a life of suffering versus a life free from suffering, you can bet your bottom dollar we are going to go for the one that is pain-free. Christianity is not about living an easier life, living a life free from pain, or believing in a God we can turn to as our personal Santa Claus to help us solve life problems and give us all we want. Quite frankly, following Jesus is often going to make our lives more complicated and challenging. Jesus' words are hard and his way extreme. Surely God did not covenant with Abraham and Sarah and with their descendants to bring them into the promised land only to say, now let it all go. The Messiah is supposed to offer security, protection, put Israel back on top. Faith in Jesus, Peter is learning, is not about the elimination of risks, the preservation of life, and the ability to control. Instead, Jesus asks us to risk it all, abandon our lives, and relinquish control to God. That is what Jesus is doing, and he expects nothing less of those who would follow him. The way of Christ is self-denial, and it reminds us that our life is not our own. Our life belongs to God. It reminds us that we are not in control. God is. Our life is not about us. It is about God. There is great freedom in knowing that truth and living that truth. And it's a freedom that will enable us to fully live. Through self-denial, our falling down becomes rising up. Losing is really saving, and death becomes resurrection. As long as we believe our life is about us, we will continue to exercise power over others, try to save ourselves, control our circumstances, and maybe even rebuke Jesus. Jesus, when you look at his life and his ministry, he rarely exercised power over others or tried to control circumstances. He simply made different choices. Self-denial is not about being out of control or powerless. It is about the choices that we make. Jesus chose to give in a world that takes, to love in a world that hates. To heal in a world that injures. To give life in a world that kills. He offered mercy when others sought vengeance, forgiveness when others condemned, and compassion when others were indifferent. He trusted God's abundance when others said there was not enough. With each choice, he denied himself and showed God present to him and to the people. At some point, these kinds of choices will catch the attention of and offend those who live and profit by power, control, and looking out for number one. People who are offended will not deny themselves. They will react. Jesus said they would. He knew that he would be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes. In fact, it happens in every age for those who choose the path of self-denial. When it happened for Jesus, he made one last choice. He chose the cross and resurrection over survival. Every single day of our lives, we face choices, and some of those choices are real turning points. In today's reading, Jesus says to each one of us, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat, I am. Don't run from suffering, embrace it. If any of you want to follow me, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Follow me, and I will show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is the way, my way, to saving yourself, your true self. What good would it do to get everything you want and lose you, the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for? The point at which Jesus says this to his disciples is the turning point in Mark's telling of the Jesus story, and it is the turning point for each of us in our faith life. The words Jesus speaks to us today present the big defining question for every Christian. If any of you want to follow me, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.